By the time the first artillery round fell, everyone already knew the valley was lost. The map called it Grid 47 Kilo, a narrow bowl of broken stone and frozen mud tucked between two ridgelines that never saw the sun after mid-morning. Soldiers called it something else. They called it the mouth, because once you went in, it swallowed you whole. They had been holding it for 6 days. 6 days of sleepless rotations, frost-bitten fingers, radios whispering lies about relief that never came. 6 days of watching drones hover just outside rifle range, patient as vultures. 6 days of listening to distant engines at night and wondering if they belonged to reinforcements or the enemy. On the 7th morning, the sky went quiet. That was when Captain Harris knew. "Positions," he said into the radio, keeping his voice steady. "All units, lock in. This is it." There were 43 soldiers left in the company. They had started with 89. Among them was Sergeant Lena Mercer. She lay prone near the northern rock shelf, her body pressed into the cold earth, breath slow, controlled. The rifle beside her looked oversized against her frame, long-barreled, scarred, modified a dozen times by hands that trusted function over beauty. Her spotter had been killed 2 nights earlier by a thermal-guided mortar, leaving her alone with the scope, the wind, and her thoughts. She preferred it that way. Lena had learned long ago that silence was safer than conversation. Silence didn't betray fear. Silence didn't ask questions you didn't want to answer. She adjusted the bipod a fraction of an inch and scanned the ridgeline. Nothing moved. That was worse than seeing something. "Sergeant Mercer," Harris called over the internal channel. "Anything?" "Negative," she replied. "Too negative." Harris exhaled. He trusted her instincts more than the sensors. Lena had not planned to be here. No one ever did. She'd grown up far from deserts and war zones, in a place where the loudest sound at night was wind through trees. She'd enlisted young, not chasing glory, but running from a life that felt too small. She'd been good at shooting, too good for people not to notice. Instructors had whispered about her scores, about the way she seemed to slow time when she looked through a scope. They called her gifted. She called it focus. The first impact hit the southern trench at 0714. The ground bucked like a wounded animal. Dirt and steel rained down. Someone screamed. Radios erupted with overlapping voices. Panic, commands, static. "Contact south! Heavy barrage! Medic! Medic! Drone swarm incoming!" Lena didn't flinch. She tracked the ridge again, then the sky. Tiny black dots appeared, growing larger, humming like angry insects. "Captain," she said calmly, "they're walking us in. This is preparation." "For what?" Harris asked, already knowing the answer. "For the kill." The second wave came from the east. Armor-supported infantry, moving fast, disciplined, spreading wide. They knew the terrain. They knew exactly where the trenches were. Someone had drawn them a map in blood. The mouth closed. For 3 hours, the company fought like men and women who understood there would be no medals waiting at the end. They fired until barrels glowed and fingers bled. They dragged wounded back into shallow cover and whispered apologies when they couldn't save them. Lena picked targets methodically. Officers first, drone operators second. She ignored the shaking ground, the screams, the way the air smelled like burning metal and fear. Her kill count climbed, but it didn't matter. There were always more. By 10:40, the southern line collapsed. "Fall back," Harris ordered. "North Ridge, go, go!" They ran under fire, slipping on loose stone, hauling each other forward. The enemy pressed hard now, confident, relentless. A rocket struck near the rear element. The explosion lifted Lena off her feet and slammed her into the rock shelf. Her helmet cracked. White noise flooded her ears. When the ringing faded, the battlefield sounded different. Quieter. Too quiet. She pushed herself up coughing, eyes burning. Her radio crackled with broken transmissions. Half sentences, static, then nothing. "Harris?" she called. "Captain, respond." No answer. She crawled to the edge of the shelf and looked down. The valley floor was gone, swallowed by smoke and fire. Bodies lay scattered like discarded gear. Vehicles burned. The northern ridge, their fallback point, was crawling with enemy silhouettes. They'd been cut off. Lena's chest tightened. She forced herself to breathe. She checked her rifle. The scope was intact. 2 magazines left. A sidearm with 1 full mag. A rangefinder that flickered but still functioned. She was alone. Below her, the last remnants of her company were being overrun. She watched Sergeant Cole, who used to complain about the food and show pictures of his kids, go down under a rush of enemy troops. She saw a medic refuse to retreat, kneeling beside a wounded soldier, until they were both gone. Something inside her fractured, sharp, and cold. She wanted to scream. Instead, she fired. Her shots were clean, precise, buying seconds, then minutes. She moved positions after every 3rd round, instinct guiding her hands. The enemy responded with suppressive fire, chewing into rock, forcing her lower. Then the drones found her. The first missile missed by a meter. The second collapsed the shelf. Lena fell. She rolled, bounced, slammed into stone again and again, the world spinning. When she stopped, she lay wedged between 2 boulders, lungs burning, vision blurred. She didn't know how long she stayed there. When she finally pulled herself free, the valley was silent again. But this time, it wasn't the silence of tension. It was the silence of aftermath. She climbed to a higher point, slow, careful, every muscle screaming. From there, she saw it clearly. No friendly movement, no radio traffic. The mouth had taken them all. Lena Mercer was the only one who had escaped. The realization hit harder than any explosion. She pressed her forehead against the rifle stock and let herself feel it. Grief, guilt, anger, all tangled together. She thought of faces, voices, small moments she'd never get back. She was alive, and she hated it. By nightfall, the temperature dropped below freezing. Lena moved away from the valley, sticking to shadow, avoiding patrols. She drank melted snow and rationed her food. She slept in 10-minute bursts, dreams filled with fire. At dawn, she reached an abandoned observation post carved into the mountainside. It overlooked the entire region, roads, ridges, supply lines. She recognized it instantly. She'd trained here years ago. She also knew what it offered. A shot, not just any shot. From this position, with the right conditions, you could see nearly 3 kilometers out. The air was thin, unpredictable. Wind shifted without warning. Gravity did strange things at that distance. Instructors used to joke about it. An impossible shot, they'd say. Good for theory, useless in war. Lena unpacked her rifle and began to work. She cleaned the barrel with slow, deliberate movements. She checked the scope alignment, recalibrated the rangefinder manually when the screen flickered. She lay prone and measured the wind with scraps of cloth tied to rock. Below her, enemy forces regrouped. Vehicles lined the road. Command tents went up. Antennas rose into the air. They were celebrating. She watched officers move freely, laughing, confident. She watched medics tend to wounded, hers and theirs. She watched supplies roll in, fuel, ammunition, everything they'd need to push deeper by morning. Her jaw tightened. She wasn't thinking about orders anymore, or extraction, or survival. She was thinking about balance, about the 43 soldiers who would never leave the mouth. As the sun dipped, Lena recorded a short transmission on an emergency channel, knowing it might never be heard. "This is Sergeant Lena Mercer," she said quietly. "If anyone receives this, the valley is lost. They're staging for advance at dawn. Coordinates will follow." She paused. "To my unit," she added, voice steady but low. "I see you. I remember you." She sent the signal and shut the radio off. Night fell fast. Stars burned cold and sharp overhead. The wind shifted from west to east, just as she'd hoped. She adjusted her calculations again. Distance, 2,900 meters. Elevation, extreme. Wind drift, unstable. Margin for error, none. Below, a group of enemy officers gathered near a command vehicle. One of them wore insignia she recognized even from this distance. High Command. Her heart slowed. She settled behind the rifle, cheek against the stock, eye to the scope. The world narrowed to lines and numbers, breath and pressure. This was what she'd been trained for. This was why she was still alive. Before she squeezed the trigger, she whispered, "Not a prayer. Not quite. For all of you." And somewhere far away, soldiers who did not yet know they were about to be saved moved unknowingly toward the edge of annihilation. The rifle felt heavier now, not because of its weight, but because of what it carried. Lena lay motionless on the cold stone, the world reduced to numbers and breath. Through the scope, the command vehicle shimmered in the thin mountain air. Heat distortion rose from its engine, bending the image like water. She adjusted the magnification down, not to see better, but to see truer. At 2,900 meters, clarity was a lie. Truth lived in math, patience, and discipline. She recalculated again, not because the numbers were wrong, but because she needed to be absolutely certain they were right. Wind at her position drifted gently east, but halfway down range it curled unpredictably, pulled by the valley's shape. Farther still, near the road, it flattened out, slowed by the armored mass of vehicles and tents.